What's up, good people? Welcome to this week's episode of The Lab here on Good Cube Kitchen. I'm your host, Yassine Butler, and this week we're getting into something that is everyone's favorite, right? Pizza. Now, when you're on keto, you can't really do pizza the way that you normally do, so I had to figure out what it was that I could do to satisfy this craving. Being a New Yorker, pizza is a very important part of my life, even though it's not super huge in my diet. I'm in California. You can get some great pizza out here, but it's nothing like getting a dollar slice when you're riding the train at 3 in the morning. It's just something about it that's just so different. So I decided I'm going to find a great cauliflower crust recipe, and I found this one that's super simple, it's really easy to make, and it's pretty delicious. So let's put this thing together. The first thing you need to do is grate your cauliflower. Now, you could just put it in the food processor just like cauliflower rice from last week, but the only thing I want you to do differently than last week is I don't want you to include your stems. You're just going to grate up the florets because the florets are going to give you a good texture. The stem has a bit more water and it's a bit rougher, and so when it cooks up, it may not cook up to the best way. So we're just gonna run this across a cheese grater. Again, you could put this in the food processor, but what I'm gonna have left is the part that you wanna leave out when you're slicing up your cauliflower for this recipe. So you only need, for a personal size pizza, about 2 cups of cauliflower, nice and grated. And you see how I've left most of the solid there? That's what you want to leave behind, right? Drop that over there. I'm saving the cauliflower because those pieces will be thrown into the food processor and they'll make some good cauliflower rice still. Now that we have our cauliflower all diced and grated up, the next thing we need to do is dry it out. And you're gonna do that by cooking it in a skillet. No oil, not high heat. You just want to cook it for about 3 to 7 minutes, somewhere in there, until you've gotten most of the moisture out of your cauliflower. So on a medium-high heat, your goal isn't to brown your cauliflower. You just want to allow it to steam. So just to check it, just want to rub your fingers through it, see if it's really still super moist. As you can see, you're getting a lot of steam coming off of it, which means there's still a lot of moisture going on. If you can hear, the sizzling has stopped significantly, which lets us know that most of the moisture has been cooked out of this. So I'm going to set this to the side and let it cool as we get working on the rest of the pieces for our crust. Okay, so the rest of this crust is actually super simple. We're just going to take 1 egg, and I'm going to do something that I think will work. It's my own personal experience. I'm going to do 1/8 teaspoon of baking powder. If you remember from the episode where we made zucchini bread, that little bit of baking powder in the zucchini bread gave it a flavor that was really reminiscent of dough. And so I want to add this over to this recipe because I want to have that reminiscent flavor. I want it to taste kind of like dough, doesn't have to be super doughy, but having that leavening agent in there really was a good flavor to it. To that, I'm going to add about 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. Kind of combined in here, and then the last thing to do is combine it over to my slightly cooled, doesn't have to be cold, just my slightly cooled cauliflower mixture. You just want it cool enough that the eggs won't start to automatically cook when you combine it over. Now, this is where you can get fancy. You can add your own flavors to the crust. You can hit it with some basil, you can hit it with some garlic, you can hit it with whatever you want, as long as it's nice and dry, and make your own flavored crust if you want. I don't think it's going to need all of that because the cauliflower, the parmesan, and then I'm going to add some really good flavors into my sauce, and since it's such a thin crust, I don't think you need all of those things working at the same time. So let's shape our crust. I lined my pizza pan with some parchment paper, and you're gonna get and this one has this really nice ring so I can judge where I want my size to be. So you're gonna get one small personal size pizza out of this. So now to try to mold it out. Now, one thing the recipe warns of is that you want to give yourself a bit of a lip for a crust, because if you let it be too thin at the edges, it's going to just burn. So you want to give yourself a bit of a lip for your crust so that... Alright, so we're going to put this in a 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes, checking on it after 10 minutes to make sure, depending on your oven, whether or not it cooks really quickly. All right. Got a bit of a firmness to it, but I'm not sure that it's done. So I'm going to give it another 3 minutes so that it can get a little bit more color on it, and it can be set up just a little firmer. I want it to have a really good firmness before we dress it with our toppings. All right, let's check on it. Alright, man, this is really, really a beautiful looking crust. Yeah, so that extra 3 minutes really let it set up, so in total it took about 20 minutes exactly. It's still a little too warm to show you the bottom, but the underside is really nice and brown. This summer I'm going to teach you how to make tomato sauce from scratch, but I'm going to wait until the peak of California tomato season so that I can get some from like a farmer's market or something really nice and fresh. Alright, now that I've gotten my sauce down, and you see I went out to the edges, that's just to keep the edges from drying out. So I'm going to lay some slices of mozzarella. Now I got a really, really dry mozzarella, and it's been in my refrigerator for a while, so it's dried out a bit more than just normal. You don't want to get one that is like maybe fresh, because the high moisture content will probably make this whole thing really soggy. And then I just got some cheap pepperonis from Walmart. Nothing expensive, doesn't have to be super fancy, just really, really delicious. Now you could go with some higher end pepperoni, but it's not my bag. Alright, so now that we've gotten our pepperonis laid, all nice like that. Okay, last thing we're going to do is our mushrooms. Now, these were dried shiitake mushrooms, and I rehydrated them while cooking them in the sauce. So I'm just going to lay some down and around. Now I'm going to put this back in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how long it takes for the cheese to melt. Everything on this is already cooked, so all we're doing is getting our cheese nice and melty and getting ready to eat. All right. Oh man, that looks like a pizza. I'm super excited to try this. So I'm gonna let it cool just a little bit. Now that I've given it some time to cool, let's cut it. Just gonna cut it into fours here. I think the biggest problem that I had was that I was impatient. I should have let this cool longer. I should have also let it cool longer and let it cook for like another 5 minutes. That's a really good pizza. So I went back and checked the notes and I figured out what I did wrong. So now that I know what I did wrong, I can tell you what to do right. As soon as you take it out of the oven, you want to pull it right off of your pizza pan onto a cooling rack. Allow it to cool for about 10 minutes. Allow it to cool for about 10 minutes on that rack so that the excess steam can come through and your pizza will hold together better. But overall, this is still a great pizza, even though it fell apart a bit. Oh, wait, I'm not gonna get a good, haha. A good piece, really nice and solid. I hope that you will give this a try at home. It is a really easy recipe. If you're making your sauce from scratch, the entire process takes about an hour to make. It could be really fun to do with someone else, maybe like a date night, or maybe just something you do with your family. Really easy, really delicious. Now, this isn't low calorie. It's really one of those cheat day meals if you're doing something like keto, but it's a really delicious cheat day meal. You don't lose out on the carbs and you have that whole experience. You have a really good firm crust, you get a really good cheese stretch, you get your pepperoni, you get your mushrooms, you get all of those things that you really want when you want a piece of pizza, and it's really good. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of The Lab. Please make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and tag 5 people so that we can grow this cooking community. And in all things, thank the good Lord for good food and good times. All that good is good cute. Peace.